You go on, sir, and pardon the interruption. I need not trouble you with all the negotiations, the trouble and the difficulty that arose before the expedition could be started fairly. Suffice it to say that at length, after much annoyance and trouble, it was started, and a vessel was duly chartered and manned for the purpose of proceeding to the Indian seas in search of the treasure, which was reported to be there for the first adventurer who had the boldness to seek it. It was a gallant vessel. I saw it sail many a mile from England ere it sunk beneath the waves, never to rise again. Sunk? Yes, it was an ill-fated ship, and it did sink. But I must not anticipate. Let me proceed in my narrative with regularity. The ship was called the Star, and if those who went with it looked upon it as the star of their destiny, they were correct enough, and it might be considered an evil star for them, inasmuch as nothing but disappointment and bitterness became their ultimate portion. And Mark Industry, I am told, was the most hopeful man on board. Already in imagination he could fancy himself homeward bound with the vessel ballasted and crammed with the rich produce of that shining river. Already he fancied what he could do with his abundant wealth, and I have not a doubt but that, in common with many who went on that adventure, he enjoyed to the full the spending of the wealth he should obtain in imagination, perhaps, indeed, more than if he had obtained it in reality. Among the adventurers was one Thornhill, who had been a lieutenant in the Royal Navy, and between him and the young Industry there arose a remarkable friendship, a friendship so strong and powerful that there can be no doubt they communicated to each other all their hopes and fears, and if anything could materially tend to beguile the tedium of such a weary voyage as those adventurers had undertaken, it certainly would be the free communication and confidential intercourse between two such kindred spirits as Thornhill and Mark Industry. You will bear in mind, Miss Oakley, that in making this communication to you, I am putting together what I myself heard at different times, so as to make it for you a distinct narrative, which you can have no difficulty in comprehending, because, as I before stated, I never saw Mark Industry, and it was only once, for about 5 minutes, that I saw the vessel in which he went upon his perilous adventure. For perilous it turned out to be, to the Indian seas. It was from Thornhill I got my information during the many weary and monotonous hours consumed in a homeward voyage from India. It appears that without accident or cross of any description the Star reached the Indian Ocean, and the supposed immediate locality of the spot where the treasure was to be found, and there she was spoken with by a vessel homeward bound from India, called the Neptune. It was evening, and the sun had sunk in the horizon with some appearance that betokened a storm. I was on board that Indian vessel. We did not expect anything serious, although we made every preparation for rough weather, and as it turned out, it was well indeed we did, for never within the memory of the oldest seaman had such a storm ravished the coast. A furious gale, which it was impossible to withstand, drove us southward, and but for the utmost precautions, aided by the courage and temerity on the part of the seamen, such as I have never before witnessed in the merchant service, we escaped with trifling damage, but we were driven at least 200 miles out of our course, and instead of getting, as we ought to have done, to the Cape by a certain time, we were an immense distance east of it. It was just as the storm, which lasted 3 nights and 2 days, began to abate, that towards the horizon we saw a dull red light, and as it was not in a quarter of the sky where any such appearance might be imagined, nor were we in a latitude where electric phenomena might be expected, we steered towards it, surmising what turned out afterwards to be fully correct. "It was a ship on fire?" said Joanna. "It was." "Alas, alas! I guessed it. A frightful suspicion from the first crossed my mind. It was a ship on fire, and that ship was—" "The Star, still bound upon its adventurous course, although driven far out of it by adverse winds and waves. After about half an hour's sailing, we came within sight distinctly of a blazing vessel. We could hear the roar of the flames, and through our glasses we could see them curling up the cordage and dancing from mast to mast like fiery serpents, exulting in the destruction they were making. We made all sail and strained every inch of canvas to reach the ill-fated vessel, for distances at sea that look small are in reality very great, and an hour's hard sailing in a fair wind with every stitch of canvas set would not do more than enable us to reach that ill-fated bark. But fancy in an hour what ravages the flames might make! Oh, the vessel was doomed! The fiat had gone forth, and that it was to be among the things that had been, and long before we could reach the spot upon which it floated, idly on the now comparatively calm waters, we saw a bright shower of sparks rush up into the air. Then came a loud roaring sound over the surface of the deep, and all was still. The ship had disappeared, and the water had closed over her forever. "But how knew you?" said Joanna, as she clasped her hands, and the pallid expression of her countenance betrayed the deep interest she took in the narration. "How knew you that ship was the Star? Might it not have been some other ill-fated vessel that met with so dreadful a fate?" "I will tell you. Although we had seen the ship go down, we kept on our course, straining every effort to reach the spot, with a hope of picking up some of the crew, who surely had made an effort by the boats to leave the burning vessel. The captain of the Indiaman kept his glass at his eye, and presently he said to me, 'There is a floating piece of wreck, and something clinging to it. I know not if there be a man, but what I can perceive seems to me to be the head of a dog.' I looked through the glass myself, and saw the same object, but as we neared it, we found that it was a large piece of the wreck, with a dog and a man supported by it, who were clinging with all the energy of desperation. In 10 minutes more we had them on board the vessel. The man was the Lieutenant Thornhill I have before mentioned, and the dog belonged to him. He related to us that the ship we had seen burning was the Star, that it had never reached its destination, and that he believed all had perished but himself and the dog, for although one of the boats had been launched, so desperate a rush was made into it by the crew that it had swamped and all perished. Such was his own state of exhaustion that after he had made to us this short statement, it was some days before he left his hammock. But when he did, and began to mingle with us, we found an intelligent, cheerful companion, such a one, indeed, as we were glad to have on board, and in confidence he related to the captain and myself the object of the voyage of the Star, and the previous particulars with which I have made you acquainted. And then, during a night watch, when the soft and beautiful moonlight was more than usually inviting, and he and I were on the deck, enjoying the coolness of the night after the intense heat of the day in the tropics, he said to me, 'I have a very sad mission to perform when I get to London.' On board our vessel was a young man named Mark Industry, and some time before the vessel in which we were went down, he begged of me to call upon a young lady named Joanna Oakley, the daughter of a spectacle maker in London, providing I should be saved and he perish, and of the latter event he felt so strong a presentiment that he gave me a string of pearls, which I was to present to her in his name. But where he got them I have not the least idea, for they are of immense value. Mr. Thornhill showed me the pearls, which were of different sizes, roughly strung together, but of great value, and when we reached the river Thames, which was only 3 days since, he left us with his dog, carrying his string of pearls with him to find out where you reside. Alas, he never came. No, from all the inquiries we can make, and all the information we can learn, it seems that he disappeared somewhere about Fleet Street." "Disappeared?" "Yes, we can trace him to the Temple Stairs, and from thence to a barber's shop, kept by a man named Sweeney Todd, but beyond there no information of him can be obtained." "Sweeney Todd?" "Yes, and what makes the affair more extraordinary is that neither force nor persuasion will induce Thornhill's dog to leave the place.